First bill on the agenda is House Bill 531. This is the House income tax proposal. What we have is an amendment to it that basically has our language in it with a reverse repealer. I'm going to offer a conceptual amendment. Obviously, everyone knows what our plan was that we did last time we were on this subject. I'm going to offer a conceptual amendment. I think Becky's about to hand out. Have you already? Yes. Everybody's got it? Okay. This conceptual amendment is basically expanding a little bit the tax plan that we proposed earlier. We still have the grocery tax cut from 7% to 5%. In this plan, we are taking the 5% bracket and we are knocking it down 1/10 of a point year over year down to 4.6, and then year 5 to year 8, eliminating the 4% bracket. The grocery tax is about $118 million a year. The 5% bracket over 4 years is about $136 million of recurring revenue. The 4% bracket is $185 million, taking the package over 8 years to $439 million. There's also, we had the tax rebate for $130 million of one-time money. We also are putting in a suspension of the gas tax for 6 months. This tax would be paid for by one-time money from capital expense. So all the agencies that get the diversion, MDOT, would be made whole. The total package is $784 million. Of it, about $345 is one-time money. That is an explanation of the conceptual amendment of the Tax Relief Act of 2022, what we're going to be proposing in this bill. Are there any questions? Seeing none, for a motion. Motion is we adopt the amendment. All those in favor signify by saying aye. All opposed? The ayes have it. Senator Bryan, for a question.
I'd like to speak on final passage.
Okay. Are there any other questions on the bill? Seeing none, Senator Bryan, you're recognized to speak on the bill.
This is absolutely heartbreaking. If this became law, this would be the most devastating thing by far that has happened in the almost 40 years I have been down here. This is a disaster. This will do untold harm to our state. In the strongest possible terms, Mr. Chairman, this is just unspeakable. $439 million every year in perpetuity out of the general fund forever, forever, forever. $439 million a year. We don't have running water in this city that's fit to drink. We have an inoperable sewer system here. This is the state capital. We can see clearly the problems with water and sewer here in Jackson. And I'm telling you, all over this state, there are similar problems in your own communities. You've got water pipes more than 100 years old. You've got sewer systems that are going to need to be replaced. You have people in Mississippi who do not have drinking water because they're too far down the road to get on the pipe, and there's no money to get the pipe to them. We have a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity right now to address the problems we have of water and sewer and make a transforming change in this state. And let me tell you something. If you think reducing income taxes is going to get a single human being to this state, you are wrong. But not having water and sewer, that'll keep them out. Trust me on this. People sort of like functioning water and sewer systems all over the state. And what you can see today in Jackson is happening all over the state. You just can't see it because it's underground. But that's okay. We have an extra $439 million a year in perpetuity that we don't need. I assume all our school districts are fine. Don't go out in the next campaign and tell the school people what I've been hearing over and over. Well, we're doing the best we can. You know, we're like a family. We just have to live within our budget. And yes, we'd like to help the schools, but we can't. $439 million a year indexed for inflation in perpetuity. No schools. You're taken care of. No more money for your upkeep. No more money to replace the money you were promised in the 1-cent sales tax that year after year after year, this body has taken away. Broken that promise when that 1-cent sales tax was passed. And the argument was always, well, we don't have enough money. You know, we're struggling. We're like a family. But apparently we have an extra $439 million a year in perpetuity out of the general fund. This is not a modest tax cut. And when I read what are purported news reports, which refer to the Senate plan as modest, if I had any hair left, I would pull it out. It's radical. It's unacceptable. What about our roads? We know that we cannot maintain roads with a gasoline tax. In the future, gasoline is going to be used less and less for public transportation. We're switching to electric vehicles and they're going to get infinite miles to the gallon. Cars are more efficient than they used to be. Our gasoline tax is $1 per gallon amount. And those dollars per gallon that it gets are worth less and less every single year because of inflation. But apart from the absurdity of this gasoline tax break, which frankly sounds like something so absurd the Democrats in the Congress wouldn't even go along with it. That's a high standard. We can't make it on the gasoline tax. It worked fine for 50, 60, 70 years. We can't do that anymore. We have got to get general fund revenue to maintain the roads. With the existing gasoline tax that you have now, you don't even have enough money to maintain the existing roads. Don't you drive on the roads? Don't you notice all those cracks in the asphalt? $439 million forever in perpetuity index for inflation. We don't have anything else to do with that. Schools in great shape, roads in great shape, plumbing in great shape. All of this because of the obsession of the speaker and a handful of his people about abolishing the state income tax. Let me tell you the mentality, although mentality is no name to call it, the mentality upon which that's based. In this same room, we had Grover Norquist, who is the intellectual, again, though that's no name to call it, movement behind this nonsense of abolishing the income tax. And I asked Mr. Norquist 3 or 4 different times how he would have voted on the 82 highway program, or 83 highway program, or 84, I lose my count. One of those years, which had a gasoline increase in it. And he never would answer the question, except to say, well, you had a tax increase. And he said, you should have found the money someplace else. But Mr. Norquist, they're calling the roll. This is a conference report. How would you have voted? He never would answer the question, although he did say and listen to his words carefully. Building highways is one of the least harmful things government does. So the mentality behind this, driven by the ilk of Mr. Norquist and his ilk, is that everything government does is harmful. The highway program was harmful. It just wasn't as harmful as some other things governments do. Where would we be today without that highway program? We wouldn't have Toyota because Toyota demanded a 4-lane highway. We wouldn't have Highway 25, 4-lane from here to Starkville. We wouldn't have Highway 72 and 78 4-lane. We wouldn't have Highway 61, Highway 49 4-lane. Can you imagine? I mean, the mind boggles what it would cost us today to construct that 4-lane highway program that was constructed back in the 80s. But it was constructed because there were people looking to the future, and they knew that Mississippi needed infrastructure. And the only way they could figure out to pay for it was to raise the gasoline tax a little bit, so they did. We were told early on that if we abolished the income tax, the people would flock to Mississippi. I think that one has finally just died of its own weight. I mean, the very notion that people are moving to Atlanta and Nashville and Dallas and New York, wherever they're moving, because of tax policy, is just misguided. We need to do some things that get people to come to Mississippi. We need to change the narrative. Right now, the President of the United States says Flint, Michigan, and Jackson, Mississippi. People know what he's talking about. That's not helping us with our national image. If instead we took this literally once in a lifetime opportunity and used it to fix water and sewer all over the state, you would be making life better for generations unborn and unbegotten. We would be thinking long-term. We would be doing something that would change the narrative about who we are and what's going on in Mississippi. But we're not going to do that. We've got $439 million a year in perpetuity index for inflation that we don't need. Not to mention that we haven't even phased in the previous reduction in taxes that's ongoing. Look at our tuition at our universities. Seems to be it's a bit steep. Wasn't that expensive when I went, adjusted for inflation or anything else. It's mighty important that we get bright people where they can get educated, get them to universities where they can learn. High tuition's a barrier, particularly for middle-income people. We are at this moment in the most uncertain time in world affairs, certainly in decades. We have no idea what the economic impact the war in Ukraine is going to have. I think we're pretty certain that there are going to be critical shortages. There are going to be shortages of wheat. It may be that it's not really feasible to plant wheat in Ukraine this year. There reduction in oil and gas. I don't even want to think of all the various problems that come about with supply chains, shortages of critical minerals. We don't know what's going to happen with inflation. Economically, in addition to some other ways, This is just an incredibly uncertain time. Why on earth would we be doing anything this long term with revenue, with the state of the world economy, which means the state of our economy, so uncertain? Isn't the prudent thing just to put some money aside, take out some insurance about the unknown? I had not seen, I'll say this about the reduction of the gasoline tax. If anybody, if anybody thinks you're going to get any political benefit out of the reduction in the gasoline tax at the pump, the prices at the pump are so high, nobody's even noticing the taxes. In fact, you could double the gasoline taxes at the pump and really nobody could tell the difference in the price because it's all so unbelievably high. I had not seen, heard tell of any of this until I walked in here a few minutes ago. So I'm reacting, Mr. Chairman, just to what I've seen. And I can't imagine that we would consider doing such a thing. As I said when I started, it's just very, very sad. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Bryan. Senator Jordan, for a question or? Okay.
Mr. Chairman, to this committee, based on what Senator Bryan has said, what will happen if we take $139 million, $439 million out of the treasury? What will fill that hole? How could we fund education? How could we fund necessities that are basically needed? How would we replace $439 million? Mr. Chairman, do you know?
Well, Senator, it doesn't take $439 million out the first year. It takes $152 million out the first year. And if you look at the collections that we've collected over the past 2 years, our collections are up, but our spending, our budget is still down around probably 6.1 or $6.2 billion. I would say that this is a slow plan. It's phased in over 8 years, which some years we may not grow as much as others, but on average, we're growing about 2.6% a year. So I think that you're talking about less than 0.5% of growth is being allocated to a reduction in the income tax rate. The money on the one-time tax rebate and the gas tax suspension is capital expense money. It's one-time money. That's a defined time period of 6 months on the gas tax suspension, and the rebate is a one-time check that goes out. So you're looking at doing something with a finite end in sight. Now, as far as the year-over-year addition of, whether it's the buy down on the 5% rate or the eventual phase out of the 4% bracket, they're done in small increments year over year. And so the plan is that as we grow going forward, as our revenues come in, if something happens, and I mean, we can always pause it if something drastic happens, but I think this is a measured approach that is, based in some thought that our revenues are going to be up. We've got room currently under where we are and what we're spending.
But our projection, the cookie may not crumble just the way you've indicated it. And I just think we're putting ourselves in jeopardy when we dig a hole like this out of the budget at this time. Maybe, I know it all won't be taken 1 year, but whatever amount we take a year in an unstable situation we have now, we may not can just do it at this time. We've just upped the educational amount of resources to that of the North Southeastern average, and we got other responsibilities. And I can't understand why we keep turning out $1 billion that got Mississippi name on it. I know why we're talking about this bill, but I just talking about the all over picture. This is dangerous time, as Senator Bryan has indicated. for us to be doing this. Maybe at some other point we can do it, but not now. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Jordan. I do have another amendment that's more of a housekeeping amendment. This has to deal with conforming a section for deductions that we did last Thursday in committee. We're going to put this in several bills to make sure it's available so it doesn't get wiped out by the Medical Cannabis Act. But it is basically an amendment that conforms the section for the deductions that we did last week. So are there any questions on the amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? The ayes have it. Are there any other questions on the bill? Senator Horn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This gas tax suspension, which will take $215 million. $215 million out of our revenue stream. Are you saying that we're going to use capital expense funds to replace that money to make make MDOT and other recipients?
Yes, that would come out of capital expense.
So what is the rationale for the gas tax suspension in the first place?
It's an inflation hedge. It helps people, the price of gas. It's eliminating the tax on it. It's bringing the gas down for a little bit.
But to Senator Bryan's point, gas prices are going up so high, you think the average Mississippian will even notice it?
They notice it. They're talking about it. I think this was it's 18.5 cents cheaper than it would be if we didn't do it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. Any other questions? Seeing none. Motion is title sufficient to pass as amended. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? The ayes have it. Next bill, House Bill 1108. Senator Johnson, recognize you. Explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is the bill dealing with railroad construction and reconstruction for Class 2 and Class 3 rail lines. We struck the House language and replaced it with the Senate language, which was for replacement of lines, $5,000 per mile. I'm sorry, 50% of the $5,000 per mile or 50% of the cost, whichever is the lesser. And for new rail, it's 50% of the cost with a cap at $1 million per customer. And there's an $8 million cap overall. And that's an explanation of the bill. There is a reverse repealer in it.
All right. I'm going to also make the same amendment I made in the other bill, just trying to make sure we have this conforming language for the deductions that we just covered last Thursday so they don't get wiped out by the Medical Cannabis Act. Are there any other questions on that amendment? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. All opposed? The ayes have it. Are there any other questions on the bill?
Move title sufficient do pass as amended.
Motion is title sufficient to pass as amended. All those in favor signify by saying aye. All opposed? The ayes have it. That bill be reported out. Next bill, House Bill 1530. Senator Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This bill authorizes the issuance of bonds up to $4.49 million to provide matching funds for federal fund drawdown on the Water Pollution Control Revolving Fund. We want to keep an avenue open to get bonds. We may use capital expense, but this will just keep that alive, and there is a reverse repealer in it as well.
All right. Any questions on the bill? Seeing none, for a motion.
Move title sufficient do pass as amended.
Motion is title sufficient to pass as amended. All those in favor say aye. All opposed? The ayes have it. The ayes have it. Next is House Bill 1663. This is a omnibus bond vehicle from the House. It'll be the vehicle we use going forward if there's a bond bill, and there is a reverse repealer in it. So if there are any questions, move for a motion.
Motion is title sufficient do pass as amended.
Motion is title sufficient to pass as amended. All those in favor signify by saying aye. All opposed? The ayes have it. Next is House Bill 1685, Senator Fillingham.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a bill that would be titled the Pregnancy Resources Act. And what it does is it allows for a tax credit for contributions made to crisis pregnancy centers. And it caps that amount annually out at on line 129 at $3.5 million. I think the idea is that with the Mississippi Dobbs case before the Supreme Court, ruling this to be expected in a couple of months. We want to make sure that we're doing what we need to do as a state to protect women and the unborn children and then the born children as they come along, and not just be about, stopping abortion, but about making sure that when those mothers are having those children, that these centers are there to really provide health care, continuing on health care for the pregnant woman and for the child. So it's a $3.5 million tax credit is what it does, and I will be happy to answer any questions. It does have a reverse repealer in the bill, by the way.
Senator Horn for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To Senator Fillingham, could you walk us through how this program would work?
It's very similar. If you look in section 2, which is already existing law, it's very similar to the adoption tax credit. A couple of years back, we set up a program where a company or an individual who would like to give a charitable contribution to an agency that helps with adoptions in the state can do so if they apply and fill out the proper paperwork with the Department of Revenue. They do that. If they meet all the criteria and qualify, then up to a certain amount, which I think was 10 million in 2021, or 5 million in 2021, and then 10 million every year thereafter, they receive those benefits. The same scenario would be applied here. The Department of Revenue would be in charge of setting up the forms for a business or an individual who would like to contribute to a crisis pregnancy center. Of course, the center would have to meet the qualifications established in the bill. And so that's kind of how it would roll.
And could you tell us what is the average credit that a business might qualify for?
There isn't, well, since this is brand new, obviously I can't give you an average of something that's not in existence yet for crisis pregnancy centers, but I do know that it can be only up to 50% of your tax burden, and you cannot use it as a deduction. If you get the credit, you can't double dip. In other words, you can't use that as a deduction as well as a credit. You can either choose to use it as a deduction if you want, or you can choose to use it as a credit, but you can't do both. And the crisis pregnancy centers, I think there are about 40 of those across the state, and they essentially provide thousands of no-cost ultrasounds by credentialed nurses and medical sonographers, thousands of no-cost pregnancy tests, no-cost counseling services for thousands of women, parenting programs and sexual risk avoidance classes for thousands of clients, thousands of free baby items for low-income families, housing and monetary assistance for those low-income families. More than 70% of women regard these crisis pregnancy centers as a necessary community resource for free service to women with an unexpected pregnancy. More than 90% of women and 88% of men believe that these centers are very necessary or fairly necessary for their health care. And these crisis pregnancy centers nationwide provide more than $266 million in annual free services to those communities. So there are 40 of those across the state of Mississippi. And I think they're serving approximately 12,000 Mississippi families. And the latest year that we had information, which was 2019, I'm sure since the pandemic has happened, you probably would see even more families now that are receiving those services. But pre-pandemic, 12,000 Mississippi families in 2019 received those services.
Is the credit able to be rolled over by the business from one taxable year to the next?
Yes, up to 5 years.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Horn. Thank you, Senator Fillingham.
Sure.
Senator England, do you have a question?
Yes, just a brief question, Mr. Chairman.
You're recognized.
Thank you. Senator Fillingham, I appreciate your work on this. I understand it's a strike all, and I just wanted to make sure I'm clear. On line 129, our strike all caps these tax credits at $3.5 million.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Do you know what that was when it came over from the House?
It was less. We're upping it.
Okay, we're upping it. Okay, great. I think that's a good idea. I think it's a great bill, and appreciate your work.
$2 million as it came to us. We have raised that to 3.5.
Okay, great. All right. Glad to hear it. Thank you for answering my question.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Senator England. Any other questions? We're going to offer the same amendment to make sure it gets in this bill. So We'll have several different opportunities to make sure what we pass Thursday doesn't get messed up, but this amendment is the same, conforming this section for the deductions we passed out last week, so they don't get messed up by the Medical Cannabis Act. Are there any questions on the amendment? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. Any other questions? Senator Filligan for a motion.
Move that we pass, do we have to adopt the strike law first?
Title sufficient.
Title sufficient to pass,
As
strike
amended.
law.
As amended. All right, motion is title sufficient to pass as amended. All those in favor signify by saying aye. All opposed? The ayes have it. Next bill is House Bill number 1687. This is the Children's Promise Act. This strike all has a reverse repealer in it, and it takes the amount up to, I think, $20 million. It does have a reverse repealer in the bill, but it does take the total amount up to 20 million. It also adds language on 36 that it is an accredited by a regional accrediting agency for the school portion. And it is split 50-50 between foster care and the schools. Yeah. That is an explanation of the bill. There is a reverse repealer, so we'll go to conference. Are there any questions on the bill? Senator Blunt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This bill and the previous bill lead me to ask the question, what is the total amount of money that taxpayers can choose to pay their taxes to private entities instead of to the state of Mississippi? I think the previous bill was 3.5, and I think this is, what's the current amount for this program?
It's 20 million total,
But the program currently exists, right?
16 million.
So we're up in that too.
Mhm.
Are you,
Splitting it between the foster care and the schools.
are you aware of other programs where, I mean, my sense is that these are first come, first served credit programs, right?
Mhm.
And so the people who are plugged in and, you know, on top of this, and I guess get online at midnight. And I had somebody, a constituent of mine, call me trying to have their taxes go to the Catholic school that their children attend, and they were online at 5 minutes past midnight and they didn't get it. So they had to pay the same amount of money. They just paid it to the state of Mississippi, to the general fund, which we've discussed. And we're not able to have their taxes directed to the Catholic school their children go to. And it seems to me that what we're doing, and some of these causes here and in the bill that Senator Filligan just handled, while these may be good people doing good things, that we are increasingly allowing a small number of connected people to direct their taxes to the private charity of their choice instead of to the state budget. I mean, isn't that the concept behind these bills?
It allows them to send their tax dollars to these entities, yes.
And I think the child protection services part of it, I understand, but for the second part that is defined beginning on line 35, so you can have a private accredited educational services organization, and you can have children who have a disability, which is not really defined, and you can just pay your tax. What sort of entities would these be? Because these would not necessarily be foster care entities that serve foster care children, as I read line 44 through 46. Is that right? That the subsection 1 deals with foster care and child protection services. Subsection 1 deals with children in foster care placement. But on line 44, it's just any child, any private group that's accredited that has a child with a chronic illness or a physical, intellectual, developmental, or emotional disability. And I could just, if I'm online at midnight with the Department of Revenue and manage to get my claim in first, that it could go to what kind of group is that?
They have to be accredited by the regional accrediting agency, and it talks to specific, I think in subsection 2I and 35, everything under that. So it would be the
If I have a child in a wheelchair and I want it to go to a private foundation that serves the private school that my child attends,
yes.
that would qualify. Because my child is
If the school's
disabled.
qualified, the school.
Right,
has
if
to
there's
be-
a,
yeah.
it's an accredited private school and my child is in a wheelchair or has a developmental disability, and I'd rather than pay my taxes to the state of Mississippi, I want my taxes to go there, that would qualify under this language.
I believe so. They meet the
Well-
qualifications, they do. I'm not sure what you're asking.
Well, it seems to me that is overly broad. And my larger question that you've already answered is, it seems to me that we're increasing here today the right of folks to choose where their taxes go, not to the state for the benefit of all the people of the state, but to private charities that they like. And that at a time where we're seeking to reduce the general fund by a lot of money is a dangerous precedent. But I think you've answered my questions and I appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Blunt. Any other questions? Seeing none for motion, we got to add the amendment real quick, the omnibus amendment that keeps on coming. This is the amendment we discussed earlier. I've said it a couple of times. Are there any other questions on the amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. All opposed, the ayes have it. Any other questions for a motion?
Title sufficient due pass as amended.
Thank you, Senator England. Motion is title sufficient due pass as amended. All those in favor signify by saying aye. All opposed? The ayes have it. Last bill is House Bill 1691. Senator Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This creates an opportunity for people who own pass-through entities such as an S corp or partnership to elect to pay their tax from that entity instead of from their personal tax return. And that's an explanation of what the bill does. There is a reverse repealer in, and I assume that we're going to put that same amendment in as well. Okay, but that's an explanation of the bill.
Any questions? Seeing none for a motion.
Motion is title sufficient due pass as amended.
Motion is title sufficient to pass as amended. All those in favor signify by saying aye. All opposed? The ayes have it. Motion. Senator Horn.
Mr. Chairman, judging by House Bill 1530 and 1663, both dealing with bonds, is it your position or the position of the leadership that we will have a bond bill this year?
We have vehicles available.
If you were a betting man, Mr. Chairman, what would the percentage of the bet be?
I don't bet. I don't do public math and I don't bet.
Good idea on both points, Mr. Chairman.
Motion to rise and report. All in favor, say aye. All opposed, the ayes have it. Yeah. Where's the